Many times when we travel by car, we will use the map app on our phone to let us know of any detours or delays on the route. It's good to know what lies ahead. It's good to know if there are obstacles and opposition in front of you so that you can adjust. In life, we certainly face oppositions. We face obstacles. As disciples trying to make disciples in this world, there's going to be struggle. There's going to be hardship. There's going to be persecution in different forms. There are going to be obstacles to overcome. The question is, what do we do? Do we stop? Do we give up? Do we turn around and go back? Or do we find a way to overcome and keep going? The Apostle Paul is certainly the poster child in the New Testament for overcoming obstacles and opposition. We talked about him in the sermon on Sunday. Paul was stoned. He was dragged out of the city in Lystra. He was beaten later and flogged and thrown into jail. I mean, time and time again, Paul had these bad things happen to him. And many times it was a direct result of him trying to share the gospel, trying to be an ambassador of Christ. And what did he do? In all of those situations, he continued to press on. He continued to run the race that God had given him. When he could have retreated to safety and comfort and an easy life, to him it was more important to advance the gospel rather than retreat in safety. In Acts chapter 20, we get just a glimpse into Paul's mindset that helps tell us how he was able to do this. You see, he was mission-minded. And in the message, in the sermon, we talked about the difference between being mission-driven and being me-minded. In your time of discussion and reflection, you might wrestle with that idea of mission-driven or me-minded and see how it looks in your life, how it plays out in your life, especially in your God-given mission to make disciples, to be an ambassador of Christ in your world. But for Paul in Acts 20, we see a glimpse of that mindset. He talks about wanting to go to Jerusalem, probably to go celebrate the Passover. But he says he doesn't know what awaits him there. The Spirit tells him there will probably be hardship, there will be obstacles, there will be things that are in the way. And yet, he says in verse 24 that I have perspective. I consider my life worth nothing. My only aim is to finish the race, he says, and to accomplish the task that God has given me. He goes on to say that task is testifying to the grace of God, the good news of the grace of God. You see, Paul was able to overcome obstacles and opposition because he was so focused on his mission, on his purpose, on that task that God had given him to spread the gospel, to make much of Jesus, to testify about the good news of God. There's a good lesson for us in that. So often we get me-focused, and when we do that, the mission gets pushed aside, the mission of making disciples. In the sermon, we talked about a couple of different fill-in-the-blank questions. In your time of discussion and or reflection, I would encourage you to look at those questions. The first one was, blank is the greatest threat to the gospel right now. How would you answer that question? What would you put in the blank? What is the greatest threat in your mind to the gospel right now? Many of us would probably identify some kind of cultural force or a change in society or media or something going on in our world. And so often we allow our focus on that thing or that force or our fear of that thing, whatever we put in that blank, to distract us from the mission. As you look at that question on the discussion guide and focus on what's in the blank there, what you put in the blank, so often we never move past that. Our fear keeps us from moving to the second part, and that is the gospel. And it's easy to think about that in global terms. But what about when we bring it down to our own world, our own life, make it personal? And so the second question is, blank is the biggest obstacle I face in sharing the gospel right now. How would you answer that question? What is the biggest obstacle? What is causing the most opposition for you actively sharing the gospel right now? Maybe it's something internal. It's fear. It's worry that you don't know enough. It's fear of being rejected. It's fear of losing a job or some kind of anxiety associated with sharing your faith. Or maybe it's an external force, the lack of opportunity or past rejection or something else going on. But again, I think the idea is the same as with that first question. So often we fixate on what we put in that blank, and our fear of whatever that is, internal, external, or a combination thereof, our fear of that keeps us from focusing on the mission. Let's not let fear get us off mission. Let's not fixate on the global cultural problems that we see so that we lose sight of why we're here. Let's not be so afraid of sharing our faith or sharing the gospel or testifying to the good news of God's grace, as Paul said. Let's not be so afraid of what might happen that we lose sight of why we're here. You see, it was the mission, it was the task that kept Paul going, that enabled him to run that race, to get over those hurdles, to get through that opposition. And he faced some difficult times. We talked about some of those. And yet his mindset was, my life is worth nothing. My only aim is to finish the race and accomplish the task that God has given me. He was so mission-minded. May we not let fear move us off mission. Jesus has called us to be and to make disciples in this world. There are a lot of ways to do that. There are also a lot of things out there and in here that want to keep us from doing that. Let's not let fear move us off mission. Let's continue to have our faith in God. Let's continue to focus on the tasks that He has given us. And with His power and His strength and His help, we can overcome any opposition, any obstacles in our way. In fact, we can use those obstacles and that opposition as opportunities to share the gospel, to make much of Jesus. That's exactly what Paul did. They threw him in jail, and he began to praise God and sing songs, he and Silas, in jail, using that as an opportunity. And what do you know? The jailer in charge of them actually converts to Christ. You see, Paul used that obstacle, that opposition, as an opportunity. We can do the same thing. As you think through some of these passages, as you apply some of these principles to your own life, in your discussion time together, really think through what it looks like in your life to use obstacles as opportunities to make much of Jesus, to make disciples, and explore what that might look like, and then resolve to use the things that come your way as opportunities to do the task that God has given you, to testify to the good news of God's grace. May God bless you.